Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with another carded video. This one is actually for last week's color throwdown challenge. Getting a little behind here on all the editing. So, my thought process with this one was I was going through my stash of all specialty papers, aka like where I keep all my watercolor papers, and I have this like random mixed media, like pack of mixed media paper that I have no plans on using. I don't know why I bought it. You know, it's really thin. I've linked to Canson XL watercolor paper because that's what I was going to use, and it would have provided the same results, but I want to use this stuff up. So one way to use, if you've got like mixed media paper or like really thin, kind of cheap watercolor paper, this is one way to do it. It doesn't have to be this specific die set. You can use anything. But I layered two of these die cuts together, glued them together with craft tacky glue to give it a little bit more weight and a little bit more stability because, again, I'm working with very thin, flimsy paper. And I use the new Etched Tall Leaf Spray Wafer die. It's like a slimline size. It's huge. And then I'm working on my Tim Holtz travel size glass media mount. So this is a smaller one. Now, thought processes with this. I don't show the glass media mount often in videos because you can see how my lights reflect on it, which isn't the end of the world, but it makes it hard for me to film. But I wanted to use the glass because inks sit on glass completely different than they do on a like non-stick craft mat, like things that I usually use when I do ink smushing like this. Because you notice when you smush inks onto a craft mat and spray, they bead up, which is awesome. Like generally that's what you want because then, you know, you get that speckled fun look. On glass, you saw when I sprayed the ink after I smushed the inks on there, it just kind of moves. It doesn't bead up, it moves. And that's what I was kind of going for. So I used Speckled Egg, Faded Jeans, and Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide inks, sprayed them with water, and then I just keep tapping this, you know, leaf die cut into it. I didn't want solid coverage and tons of layers of ink like I normally do because I'm very heavy-handed. I wanted it more just sort of random and smooth, and I don't know, it's hard to explain that thought process, but I got what I wanted is all that really matters. So I had a second die cut. This one I didn't layer two pieces together, so it's very flimsy, and it's not cut perfectly. That's fine. I only want one side, and I'll show that later in the video why. But I did the same thing, just pressing it and mushing it. I get it all over my fingers. If that really bothers you, you could wear gloves. But this washes off really easily. You know, a few hand washings, the amount of hand sanitizer we use, you know, all the things. So I've got my two die cuts here. I set them on the side of my glass mat and I just added a bit more water, used a paintbrush and just kind of swirled the inks and added some splatter because, you know, you can never have enough. So it just adds a little bit more texture, a little bit more color, but there's also a lot of white spaces on these, which is what I was going for. So, and again, I always say this with the color throwdown, this is another one that made me think outside the box. I would not think to use these colors, at least not right now, maybe closer to, you know, November and stuff when I start thinking more moody and blue and wintry, you know, but I really like this combo. It's just nice. And of course I added gold to it because same with splatter, you can never have enough. So I pulled out my Gansai Tambi Starry Colors palette and I just mixed a couple of the golds together, again using my glass mat here. I need to use this more often. I like how liquids and paints and everything sit on it. And it's easy to clean, like I showed you. You just wipe it off and it's good to go. So I swirled the gold together, heavily splattered that on these die cuts. So I've got that just gorgeous shimmer that I will show also at the end of the video. So got that all done. Let those completely dry, set them aside. And then I worked on my die cut sentiments, which are the Thankful for You die set. I showed this in my release and review video for Simon's Stamptember release on the 1st. And they're technically meant to be separate. Like you have the Thankful for You set in it and then just the thankful word. I'm combining kind of all of it. So I have the Thankful for You base that I die cut from some cornflower cardstock, and the back of it I just used a little bit of my Spellbinders tape to hold all those little letters of the For You in place. And then rather than inlay, I just die cut that bottom portion from some gray cardstock, and I'm just adhering it on top. So it gives it a little bit of dimension, plus it was just easier than trying to inlay those letters. Or you could just skip that step and leave it all open, you know, options. Gotta have options. So for that, I use my craft tacky glue. I have this second bottle that I have of a fine tip, like a metal fine tip point on. I linked to that next to the craft tacky glue. All I did with those fine tips is they just come in a little package of 2 and you just screw it on. The craft tacky glue nozzle doesn't have any threading. It's just a plastic nozzle. But the metal, it just screws on. That's all I did. Nothing fancy. Nothing whatever, but that one is for like my fine tip, and then I have my regular craft tacky glue with no fine tip for wider areas, if that makes sense. So I'm using the fine tip for all those little tiny letters, as well as the actual thankful word, which I die cut from my still all-time favorite. This is Tonic's gold satin pearl cardstock. So it's gold, but it's not super reflective, and it's just gorgeous. So I die cut that and then adhered that, and I'd also die cut just the thankful word outline and adhered that to the thankful for you one. Again, not necessary, but it adds just that little extra bit of dimension that I wanted. So got all those adhered together, and then for my card base is more gray cardstock. This is Simon's Smoke cardstock, one of my faves. I have that and my big guillotine trimmer, and I'm just going to trim this down to 7 inches. So it's 7 inches by 8.5 inches. And then I will score this at 3.5 inches with my little score buddy and my Teflon bone folder. So this will make a 3.5 inch by 8.5 inch slimline card. So flip it around, get the whole thing scored, reinforce that score line with my Teflon bone folder. And then I had die cut more of the watercolor paper with just one of Simon's nested slimline rectangles wafer dies. And I have everything laid out here, and I was like, it needs a little bit more. It's just a little too plain for my liking. So I took the Speckled Egg Distress Oxide ink, added a bit of water, and I'm just going to paint this onto the watercolor paper rectangle here. I love Speckled Egg. Seriously, it is just the nicest, palest, like neutral shade of blue. Like as I was editing this, I was like, you know, I might need to get some paint, like not just distress paint. I have the distress paint of this too. It's fabulous. But like actual house paint in a color like this, I'm just like, I think I need some walls in this color because it's so pretty. Anyway, I'm distracting myself. So I just painted a light wash of this onto this background, purposely not keeping it even. It's going to dry back a little bit and be a little bit paler, and that's exactly what I wanted. And then of course I'm going to add more splatter. Can never have enough, ever. So I'm going to add some more gold splatter to the background. Same thing, swirled up those 2 colors, applied it to my mat, and I'm going to swirl those and some extra water. I ended up off camera, I thought I had filmed it, but I didn't. Before it fully dried, I just blotted it with a paper towel, so it kind of picked up some of the excess, so it's not quite as intense as it looks here on the background, you know, but the gold shimmer and everything is still there. So splattered, add water, all the fun things. And then I cut a mat for this out of some of Simon's slate cardstock, just to frame it a little bit with that darker gray, just to, again, give it that little extra something. So adhered those layers together. And then once those are good and adhered, I'm going to adhere that die cut leaf spray to this. And again, using my fine tipped craft tacky glue. And my big old messy bun's gonna get in the way because I gotta make sure. You can see as I get farther away from my eyes, my head gets more and more in frame so I can see what I'm doing. And that's, again, the reflection makes it harder for me to see what I'm doing. So that's why I don't use the glass mat in many of my videos. So added the adhesive mostly just to the center, like to the spine of this leaf spray, and then a bit to the leaves. They pop up a little bit, but not a ton. But that's also why I had doubled the layers originally, because really thin watercolor papers, you know, it's the same thing with like really thin, cheap cardstock, etc. They'll curl, which sometimes is nice. Again, depending on the look you're going for, you know, for dimension. But other times it just ends up looking like, why is this all lumpy, bumpy, not looking good? It's usually because it's very thin paper. So I applied the leaf spray, let that dry, and then I'm going to adhere this to my card base. And then for the piece on the inside, or I'm going to adhere my sentiment first. Although this, again, I could have just left it without sentiment, or just put the sentiment on the inside. Would look great too. This leaf spray is gorgeous. It just looks like, almost like, I think someone had mentioned that in my release and review video. They're like, this is like a home decor piece. And it's like, yeah, you could do like a triptych of the 3. Like do 3 of them, frame them up. It would look fabulous. So many ideas. Anyway, this is why I didn't worry about this second die cut. Like, the leaves were all janky and stuff. I just cut all those off, so I only have half a leaf spray because I didn't want to cover the entire inside of the card. And then again, applying adhesive to the spine and to the leaves. And then I'm going to adhere this right against the score line on the inside of the card. And again, my original idea was to just leave it as is, not add anything else. But then I remembered the XL Greetings 3 set that just came out. And I was like, oh, there was a sentiment that I was like losing my mind over that I was like, is going to be a favorite. And it is. So put the card base into my Misty so I can stamp the "You Just Make Things Better" sentiment from that set. I love the size of these sentiments. They're just perfect. Perfect. Love it. So I lined that up on the inside of the card, and I'm going to ink that up with that same Faded Jeans Distress Oxide ink. So ink that up. I'm going to stamp it a couple times because it's a brand new stamp, and sometimes brand new stamps like to be a little finicky. You know, inks will beat up on them. Using them multiple times, cleaning them off really well, rubbing them with your fingers, all those things work to help kind of remove that little bit of almost like shininess from a new stamp so that they take ink better. So I did that. And then, of course, as a last little bit of embellishment, can't not have some gold baubles. So Trinity Stamps gold baubles to the rescue. Sprinkled those throughout my card front. And then once I was kind of happy with where I had them, I'm going to adhere them into place with just dabs of craft tacky glue. Simple, easy, blingy, love. And then I'm going to pair this card with one of Simon's slate envelopes that matches. That's also why I framed the main kind of image with that cardstock, so everything's all matchy-matchy. And then yeah, I've got that like shimmer and gold fabulousness from all the splatter and the baubles and the sentiment and Life is Great. And then the inside, fabulous. So as always, I'll have a link below the video to my blog post, and I'll link to the color throwdown challenge in my blog post as well, and then supplies to everything. All that info will be in the description box below the video if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting. I very much appreciate it, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!